For the first time in a long time, buyers in North Shore Pump have a little bit more leverage at the negotiation table. We're going to cover that today in your January 2026 housing market update. What is going on, party people? My name is Chris Elliott, local realtor here, resident in North Shore Pump. In this video today, what we're going to do is we're not going to only cover the national housing headlines, but we're also going to be covering what's happening in our local backyard North Shore Pump market. And then I'm going to tie it up with a nice pretty bow on you at the end. And I'm going to give you 3 practical tips that we're currently giving to both our selling as well as our buying clients. Let's jump into it. All right. National headlines. The housing word of 2025 was affordability. It's what all of your favorite politicians were talking about. It's what the news was talking about. And it was absolutely one of the central issues for us in 2025 in the housing market, to be candid. So interesting enough, renting is officially cheaper than buying in all 50 major metros, according to Bankrate, at least on a kind of monthly payment point. I would submit to you that the one important stat that I think everybody misses with that is the wealth that can be built through real estate ownership. Another factoid to consider is if you look at the home price expectation survey, which is a bunch of real estate economists that kind of get together and predict how much appreciation they believe we're going to see over the next 5 years. They said that if you bought a home, a median home priced home for $400,000, which it's hard to find in our area, but in greater Central Virginia, that's about our median price. If you bought a home for $400,000 in 2025 and you kept it until 2030, based on the appreciation rates they foresee us having, you will have built $61,000 in equity, which is phenomenal. $61,000 that's added to your net worth that you simply would not have if you were renting. So that is another factoid to consider. If you have a young person in your life that is debating whether to continue renting or to buy, that might be a stat worth sharing with them. And you might be saying, hey, yeah, Chris, but what about 2008? Every one of those people lost money. Well, interesting enough, First American is a huge title company in the United States, and they put out some data recently that was kind of interesting. They found that even folks that bought at the quote unquote worst time in 2006, if they held on to those properties through 2025, they still would have come out better than folks that have been renting in that same 20-year time period. So simply stated, real estate ownership builds wealth over time. It is a long-term game sometimes, but still better wealth building than renting. All right, in other news, home affordability is actually improving in 48 out of 50 metros month over month, which is phenomenal. Zillow.com recently put out a stat that they said housing affordability is at a 3-year high, which is pretty cool. We're seeing where national inventory is at its highest level since 2019. We've had over 1 million active listings for a few months now. So basically, nationally, we're heading back to a more normalized market. Kind of the COVID craziness is behind us and returning to a more stable real estate market, in my opinion, a good thing. The days on market nationally is normalizing to about the low 60s. So about 2 months, homes are selling on a national average. Price reductions are up 20% year over year. So some sellers are having to come down on the price, and builders are currently offering massive incentives, not only in Richmond, but across the country to move their new construction product. Lennar, one of the biggest home builders, production home builders in the country, is currently giving back 14% of their sales price in buyer incentives. So just for context, if you're buying a $400,000 home, that's roughly at $50-ish thousand in incentives, which is absolutely insane in my humble opinion, but they're certainly offering these huge incentives to move their product. And last but not least, Lawrence Young, chief economist, National Association of Realtors, super smart guy, expects 10 to 15% more home sales, so basically 10 to 15% more home selling in 2026 as mortgage rates increase. So I think we're going to see a lot more movement in the market in 2026 than nationally than what we saw this past year in 2025. That's what's happening on the national backdrop. And I know you're sitting there saying, hey, Chris, that's all great. I could have gotten that on the YouTubes or on the Googles. What's happening in our local North Shore Pump market? Well, let's jump into it. So in summary, we are in a high demand, higher price market, taking a normal seasonal breather, but certainly not losing strength. So our median sales price currently in North Shore Pump is $626,000. That's $257 per square foot, which is up from $253 in October. So buyers are definitely still paying a premium price for this area. So in the month of November, which we're currently still waiting on December's numbers, but in the month of November, we saw our median days on market shot up from 7 days on the market in October to 26 days in the month of November. Keep in mind, we're dealing with a small data set here, so 1 or 2 properties that take forever to sell could drastically skew those numbers, but I would submit to you in the grand scheme of things, even 26 days is still a very short days on market on a median. Now, here's where buyers picked up a little bit of negotiation power here recently. So in October, our median percentage of asking price, basically how much of their asking price were sellers getting, was 100%. That actually dropped to 98.3%. So not a huge amount of negotiation, but I know if you've been a buyer shopping in the area over the last couple of years, you will welcome any sort of leverage coming your way because it has been very much favored to the sellers for a number of years now. So we're certainly not in a discount market. We're a little bit backed off from the kind of frenzied market that we saw during the COVID years. As far as inventory and supply, month supply of inventory is currently sitting at 2.3 months supply of inventory. Keep in mind, anything under 6 months is considered a seller's market. So we're still very much in a seller's market. The amount of homes left on the market this past month was 29 homes, which was up slightly from 26, but is still very, very tight. If you live here, you know inventory doesn't magically appear. Buyers are always fighting for the limited options in our area. Quick recap of the market activity. We saw 31 new listings, we saw 38 pending sales, and we saw 40 closed sales. So even in November, more homes went under contract that came onto the market, 38 to 31. That imbalance is the entire North Shore Pump story in a nutshell. So in summary, North Shore Pump is behaving exactly as expected for late fall. The pace slows, negotiations loosen just a hair, but the fundamentals are still very tight. Inventory remains scarce, pricing is steady, and quality homes still move quickly. This market is setting up for a very strong Q1 of 2026. All right, now as we do always, we're going to give you 3 practical tips that we're currently giving to our seller clients as well as to our buying clients. So for my sellers, number 1, don't confuse seasonality with weakness. We're seeing a slight slowdown in the market, or we did, at the end of 2025. But what I can tell you is historically, the buyers are ready to make a move to buy a home starting in January as a New Year's resolution or kind of New Year, New Me. Generally, what we find is that the majority of sellers don't hit the market until April or May. So that kind of gives a sweet spot for sellers, January through March, where buyers are out there, they're ready to rock and roll, but there's not as many sellers on the market. So if you're somebody that is considering a sale in the first half of 2026, you might want to consider listing a little bit earlier than you might think. Is kind of flies in the face of conventional wisdom. Secondly, your home's condition creates your negotiation leverage. So the more turnkey you can make your property, the more updated you can make it, the more a buyer would walk into your property and not have to do a thing, the more demand that's going to be on your home, the more demand that's on your home, the more leverage you have in the negotiation. There's no magic wand that any realtor is able to, wave to magically create more demand for your home. You simply have to put in the prep work, have a good product that you bring to market, and that will ultimately give you leverage in a negotiation with a buyer. And last but not least, realistic pricing is still driving strong activity. If and when you put your home on the market, I would encourage you, price it appropriately for the market value. The folks that I tend to see not do as well are the ones that overprice their homes thinking that they're leaving room for negotiation or they might just get it. Those homes typically sell for under their fair market value just because they introduce more time to the equation. The longer your home sits, the less negotiation leverage that you tend to have with a buyer, because when your home's been on the market for a while, a buyer will naturally want to negotiate more with you because they know there's more room to negotiate because they're the only ones at the table. For my buyers, realize that more inventory is coming later in the year. So if you're looking around right now and you're saying, hey, there's really nothing on the market, there generally is nothing on the market. But what we know is we tend to see more inventory tend to hit in March, April, May. So don't get discouraged. More inventory is on its way. Secondly, get your ducks in an order now. So if you're somebody that is considering a purchase in 2026 and you haven't yet talked to a real estate professional, talked to a mortgage professional, kind of figured out a game plan of how you're going to execute on your home purchase, I would encourage you to start that now, as opposed to what a lot of folks do is they start flat-footed, in the thick of the market in, March, April, May. I would encourage you to have that initial conversation. Doesn't mean you necessarily need to go out and put a contract on a home tomorrow, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have that initial conversation and know what that game plan looks like. And last but not least, get into the home now and refinance later. I can't tell you how many folks I talk to that are waiting until rates come down to some magical number that may or may not ever happen. The cool thing about real estate is you can always buy now and refinance later if and when rates come down. What you cannot do in the future is go back and renegotiate the sales price. And we are in an environment where I personally believe we're going to continue to see home prices appreciate. If you're trying to time things, if you're trying to be cunning and smart, I would encourage you, buy the home now, let price appreciation do its thing, and then refinance your mortgage rate if and when they go down at some point in the future. Well, guys, that was your January 2026 housing market update. If there was anything I did not cover, throw it in the comments or shoot me a DM. Look forward to serving you in 2026. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next month.